As a salon or spa owner, cosmetology school gave you the skills to serve clients, but it definitely didn't teach you how to run a business. Somewhere along the way, you probably thought ownership would mean freedom, but instead you're working more hours than ever, barely paying yourself, and low-key worried everything's going to fall apart the second you step away. Welcome to the Beauty Biz Breakdown, where we give you the real strategies, systems, and structure that you need to fully step into the CEO seat in your beauty business. Hey, welcome back to the Beauty Biz Breakdown. This is the go-to podcast for salon owners who know their business could be doing better and want a more profitable, more predictable beauty business. I'm Brie, and as always, I've got my bestie and co-host Chandra here with me today. Hey, girl.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
Doing good. Getting over a cold right now, but other than that, doing pretty good.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better. This weather's been crazy all across the nation, so there's a lot of people sick out there for sure. All right, guys, so this is going to be part 2 from last week's episode. And last week we talked about insurance, what you should have, what it actually covers, just really understanding your policy as a business owner. This week, we are getting into what happens after something has already gone wrong or already gone down. You've already kind of had the back and forth with the client. And now it's just not a small situation anymore. It's a little bit bigger. It's either turning into a full insurance claim or it's going even further than that. I feel like this is where a lot of owners get really, really thrown off because up until this point, you're handling it just like a normal client situation. You're talking, you're trying to fix it, you're going back and forth as many times as you possibly can. And then all of a sudden, everything changes. And now you're just sitting there like, okay, wait, what am I actually supposed to do right now? Most people out there don't have an answer for that. So they just keep handling it the same way that they were before. And I'm telling you guys, that's where things can go sideways really fast without you even realizing it. So before we get into this, I just want to say this really clearly. We are not attorneys. This is not legal advice. And if you ever find yourself dealing with something like this, you need to work directly with your insurance company and your legal professionals. What we're going to do in this episode is just kind of walk through what this would actually look like once it gets to the point of a claim or a lawsuit of some sort, because I think that's important. And not everything gets handled in the same way during those two scenarios. And if you don't kind of understand what's going on, it's really easy to respond in a way that's going to make things way harder than they ever need to be. I do want to say this. If you did not listen to last week's episode, I would highly recommend going back and listening to that one first, because it will really shed some light into what we're talking about. Chandra, when you think about that moment where a situation has already escalated and it's not just a conversation between the beauty business owner and the client anymore, what do you feel like is the first thing most owners do that actually make it worse?
I think they try too hard to fix the situation without actually just kind of taking the right steps to do it. Like they get too involved in trying to smooth it over or, offer something or do something. And I feel like that's, when you start admitting fault or you get yourself into trouble that way. And I feel like that's where they kind of go instead of just taking the proper steps, like you're saying, and, consult an attorney if it's bad or follow what your insurance says. They try to do it on their own.
Yeah, 100%. It's terrifying. I mean, we kind of lash out. So I think let's just kind of talk about this today like it's actually happening. Because when you get to the point that you already had whatever situation happened in your salon or spa, you've tried to handle it at this point, and now it's just gone past that. You're either dealing with an insurance claim or you're dealing with a point to where the client is going to take legal action. Those are really the two options that there is. And it is a really different place to be in than just handling an upset client. It's funny. I think a lot of people have never been through this situation, so they just don't understand it. But at the same time, you would be surprised at how often it actually does happen in the beauty industry. And I think a lot of owners just kind of get tripped up in this situation, especially if it's where you've just tried and tried to fix things over and over, right? Because we are so used to being able to talk through things all the time. You're used to being able to figure it out with the client. 9 times out of 10, 9.5 times out of 10, you can do that. And then all of a sudden, it's like overnight, you are just not in that situation anymore. And there's a lot of people that are going to be involved now, and it's going to be a bigger deal and a bigger process that's going to be happening, whether you realize it or not. So I think that's really, really important to talk about. Chandra, have you ever been through any type of lawsuit in your salon?
Say it ever escalated that far, but we've been in a situation before where it could have escalated that far. We had actually a model for photo shoot. It wasn't even a paying client that came in that had we followed all the steps. She signed a release form. She knew she was getting a very extreme color change. She knew, nothing really that bad even actually happened to her. Her scalp got a little bit red from the bleach, but nothing, no damage. It was just irritated, and the hair did get dry. I mean, she knew, going into it what was going to happen, and they did try to. They took all these pictures of her scalp. They doctored it up. It didn't even look like right at all. Like you knew there was stuff that was they were just trying to, But at the end of the day, she signed a release form, and so when we consulted our attorney, he was just like, but she was going after us. She was trying to do all these damning, like, posts on social media. Like, anything we posted, she would get in there and comment, like, don't go there, it's horrible. Like all these things. She was coming after us. And so we definitely had to do something, but we did, our attorney got involved. It was handled. There was no lawsuit because there was nothing we did wrong. At the end of the day, like, you sign up to be a hair model, that's just the risk you take sometimes. And you signed a release form saying you knew that, your hair was going to get bleached to white, and we would do our best to keep it healthy. And so,
Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to a client filing a claim or even taking legal action is a lot of times people think it has to be something huge, like something went really wrong or somebody completely messed up. And that is not always the case at all. An insurance claim or a lawsuit can come from a lot of different situations. And a lot of them are things that happen in salons and spas all the time, like literally every second of every day. It could be something with the service, like a client feeling like their hair was damaged or their color didn't turn out the way that they expected, kind of like what you said. But it can also be things that have nothing to do with the result at all. It could be a reaction, to a product that they purchased. It could be something with their skin, maybe a product that they purchased. It could be a client saying that they weren't fully told what to expect. Literally hearsay, he said, she said. It could be a sanitation concern. It could be a client getting hurt in the salon. A lot of the things we talked about last week. It could even be something that started as just a normal, very, very small complaint. But then people hype them up, they talk them up, and then it turns into this, you know, this just wasn't handled right at all after the fact, and it turns into a really, really big deal. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong and can cause these things to multiply in ways that they never should. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that because I really think beauty business owners think that it's just never going to happen to me. But I promise you, an insurance claim or a lawsuit is not tied to just one type of problem. It is tied to how a situation plays out and how a client decides to move forward with it, not you, the client. Chandra, when you think about insurance claims or lawsuits inside of a salon or a spa, do you feel like most owners assume that it only happens in these really extreme situations? Or do you think that maybe they don't realize how often these normal situations can turn into something way bigger?
yeah, I mean, I think they do think it's got to be something more extreme in order for it to go that far. I think that, again, like, we get so used to the normal things that just happen behind the chair or in the treatment room. There's little nuances all the time, like, that we deal with. And so you forget that, yeah, that's just normal stuff to you, but that might not be normal to the client that you're working on. And they might think that that's an extreme situation, even if we think it's like not really a big deal.
No, absolutely. I think that's right. I mean, as I was kind of getting today's topic together for this episode, I started kind of thinking about things and I'm like listing things that could go wrong at any point in time just throughout our normal day. And I was like, holy crap, I didn't even realize how many things could actually, cause a problem. So there's a lot out there. Okay, so once it gets to the point where a client has filed either an insurance claim or maybe started taking legal action, I think this is where things start to separate a little bit. And this is where a lot of confusion can come in for salon or spa owners because an insurance claim and a lawsuit are not the same thing, but they can be connected a lot of the time. And I don't think people realize that. So, an insurance claim is obviously when your insurance company is now involved and they're handling the situation. A lawsuit is when the situation has moved into this legal process where attorneys are involved and things are very, very formal. Sometimes an insurance claim stays, within that process and it gets resolved right there. But sometimes the situation can move from an insurance claim into a lawsuit, just depending on how everything plays out. I think people think it's one way or another. It's either an insurance claim or it's a lawsuit, and they don't see how those connect. Chandra, do you feel like most beauty business owners even understand the difference between an insurance claim and an insurance claim that moves into a lawsuit? Or do they just hear one of those words and assume that it's all kind of the same thing?
They kind of assume it's all the same thing. I don't know that they've, ever looked into it far enough to see what the differences really are. And, your insurance should cover you in a lawsuit, right? And so I think they always do have to connect, a lot of the times, as long as you have the right coverage, which we talked about last week or last time. So making sure that you have those things, but they're definitely interconnected. And I think most owners don't even realize the correlation between the two in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. So let's kind of talk about what's actually happening behind the scenes because I think this is the part that nobody really sees or understands. And it's also the part that makes people feel the most out of control. I know for me, this would be a huge issue. When an insurance claim is filed, your insurance company is not just looking at one moment or just one part of the situation. They're looking at the entire timeline of what happened. Once again, talked about this a little bit last week. That means what led up to the situation, what was communicated, what expectations were set, what was actually done, and how everything was handled once the issue came up. So if a client says that their hair was damaged, it's not just about that end result. It's about what was discussed before the service, what the client agreed to, what was documented, and what communication happened after the fact. And you guys have to hear that. What communication happened after the fact? If a client gets hurt in your salon, it's kind of the same thing. You're going through those things. Chandra, have you ever seen a situation where the way something was handled after the fact actually ended up mattering just as much or more than what actually happened in the beginning?
Well, yeah, because I think a lot of times we try to cover a lot of those bases in the very beginning, but I think sometimes afterwards we just kind of are like, oh, this has been done, it's done, we've moved on, and everything's like in the past, right? And so I think we just don't always pay attention to those situations. And I feel like, for us, a lot of times is maybe we didn't, we weren't 100% clear on what the outcome was going to be in the beginning. So then afterwards, even though we thought they understood that they weren't going to have platinum blonde hair today because they had black box dye in their hair before, they didn't understand, and so I think that after the fact really comes back to bite you. We've had that happen before. That's why now we're very extremely thorough in the beginning so that you don't end up getting bit by that at the end.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why we were so big last week on bringing up the way that you handle, everything so that you can be sure that once the communication gets to a certain point, you just stop regardless of the situation. You have to. I think when a situation is being handled by an insurance claim, it really feels different because now you're not able to control how fast this situation is going to move anymore at all. And that's one of the hardest parts. When your insurance company is involved, you have an adjuster, right? They are going to review all of that stuff. They're asking for information. They're putting timelines together. And it definitely doesn't all get handled overnight. It can be a very, very long, drawn out process. And I know for a fact this is where a lot of owners start to feel uncomfortable because you're sitting there and you're waiting and you don't have all the answers yet and you just want it handled. You want it off your plate, but it's just not how it works. Now, if a situation moves into a lawsuit, this is where things become super, super formal and more structured. And I think people really need to understand this. A client most likely is going to have an attorney involved. They don't have to, though. You have to realize that. You might receive something official like a letter or paperwork, something like that. Or somebody may just show up to your salon and hand you documents. I'm sure we've all heard that saying out there, you've been served or you got served. That's exactly what people are talking about when they use that term. I know that that phrase sounds really, really intense and it scares people, but you need to understand all that that means is that you were formally notified that the situation is now part of a legal process. So, yes, it sucks, but it shouldn't scare the crap out of you at all. From there, there's a couple of different ways that this whole situation can go. Some situations are going to stay smaller, like going through small claims court. That's usually when someone is going after a certain amount of money and it's handled in a pretty simple way. Other situations are bigger civil cases. And that just means there's going to be more steps, more people involved, and more that has to be done in order to work through the process. But it doesn't go straight into the courtroom like people think. There's a process that starts once that lawsuit is filed. There's the complaint, and then there's a response, and then both sides start pulling everything together around what happened. And I think that's where you're going to start being asked for your records, your consultation forms, your notes, your messages, your photos, anything that shows what happened and what was talked about. You may also have to answer questions about that. Sometimes that's done in what's called a deposition, which just means that you're answering questions about the situation under oath. It's not a courtroom, but it is a very formal way and it matters. It's very, very important. From there, a lot of those situations don't actually go all the way to trial. That's important to understand too. They'll go through something like mediation or settlement, where both sides are just trying to come to an agreement and get it handled without dragging it all the way out. If it does go all the way through, and you do have to show up in court, it still comes back to the same thing though. It's not about who explains it better or who tells a better story. It's about what you have and what you can actually show and prove. And depending on your insurance, this is also where they may step in, like Chandra said, on the back end, helping with the legal side, helping manage the case and trying to get it resolved without it going further than it needs to. At the end of the day, guys, the main goal for you and your legal team, your insurance company, is to just get the situation handled, protect your business, and try to keep it from turning into something bigger than it needs to be. This isn't a situation that should just terrify you. Is it scary? Yes. But there is a distinct process that everybody has to go through, and it's not as scary as it seems. Chandra, when you hear owners talk about being served, do you feel like they understand what that actually looks like, or does it feel way more dramatic in their head than what it usually is?
Oh, I think it's definitely way more dramatic in their head than it usually is. I mean, I've never been served in a situation like that, but I got served once for an unemployment situation where I had to start garnishing wages from an employee. And I remember that was the first, I was like freaked out because I was like, what do you mean? Why am I being dragged into this? This shouldn't have anything to do with me. And then, I gave the paperwork to my accountant because that's actually who was going to handle the paycheck stuff. And he's like, this doesn't even have, this is fine. All you have to do is just check this box and, you know, and take this out of her check. And that's it. And I was like, but it, I was like so upset at first because I thought she's like bringing me into something that like I didn't want to be part of, and I didn't realize that's all it was. So I think a lot of those situations, whether it's an insurance, a lawsuit, or anything, like when you get paperwork like that, you automatically, go to a dark place in your head and freak out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would. I know I would. I would absolutely spiral out of control. And I think our brain, and this is something that we talked about earlier, that's why our brains go straight to how do I just make this stop right here, right now? Because you just want it over. You're completely stressed out and you don't want to keep dealing with it. And so a lot of times you start thinking things like, I'm going to contact the client again, or I'm just going to try to refund them, or I'm just going to send them something, or I'll just do whatever I need to do in order to get this done. I totally understand that because I think that's just a natural reaction. In that normal situation, that's how you would handle it if a client was upset. A lot of people offer refunds or do things, but you fix it, you smooth it over, you take care of the client and move on. But once an insurance claim or a lawsuit has been filed, that decision just, you have to understand it doesn't stay between you and the client anymore. And you are going to really, really hurt your case if you keep reaching out. In fact, most of the time, those people aren't even allowed to speak to you anymore. So you've got to be really, really careful. Chandra, if you were ever in a situation like this, or let's say you were coaching a salon owner who was going through a situation like this, what is the first words of wisdom that you would share with them just to get them to calm down and realize that this is just part of business ownership?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is just making sure that you have all your bases covered. Like, don't be naive. People do crazy things. Attorneys out there are looking for people to be able to sue businesses. You know what I mean? And so, as the owner, it's not really in your favor necessarily, those situations. And so, you just want to make sure that you cover your bases. I think if anything ever comes your way and you get, something happens, then you just need to learn how to like handle it with grace. Like, okay, let me figure out what this actually is before I get involved, before I get emotional, before I get crazy like we usually do. And let's see, where this actually goes. Because especially if you are covering your bases, 9 times out of 10, like any issue we've ever had, it has always just kind of fallen by the wayside and not been pursued because we had all our bases covered. And so I think that's the biggest thing. That's the best advice I can give.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think something else that can kind of start happening here that people don't really think about is everything that's going on around you in your salon while all of this is happening. Because your team is there, right? They can tell that something's up. They hear little pieces of it because us salon owners never keep our mouths shut. It is what it is. They start asking questions. And now you've got more people involved in a situation that's already outside of your control. And you've got to be sure that there is one clear way that the situation is going to be handled. Because if not, it's going to turn into a lot of different conversations around your business without you realizing it. Different people are going to be saying different things, different opinions, different assumptions. And now it's not just about what actually happened anymore. It's about everything that's being said around it too. And you've got to be careful in this situation because there is a chance that your employees can get brought into this and be called in to testify or to go into that deposition or whatever that may look like. And so you have to make sure that you are handling this with kid gloves when it comes to your team and your business, especially if it was one of your employees who serviced this client or who was with them when the incident happened. Chandra, have you ever even heard or known of anyone where maybe a situation like this happened and it got really, really messy for them or their team?
Yeah, actually, quite a few years ago, I was an expert witness in a case like this. They brought me in as the hairstylist expert. The attorney that was defending the woman that was suing the salon, it was one of my clients. And so he asked if I would be the expert witness for them. And unfortunately, it was a really bad situation where the stylist that did her hair really was neglectful. She had a golf ball size burn right on the top of her head from bleach because she was put under the dryer, left under the dryer too long. The hair literally was gone. It was like a divot. Like hair won't probably even grow back. Like this was a really, really bad situation. And I think, in that case, like I remember, the owner was upset. It was a team member that did it. It was not a commission salon. So she ended up not necessarily having to get super involved, but it was still her salon. And so that's the other thing I think that rental salons don't realize is like, you still need to make sure you have insurance for these people, even if, because it happened in her space, even though it wasn't her business, she still got dragged into this. And, the stylist, I'm sure, ended up out of business afterwards because they sued her. She didn't have the proper insurance that she needed to cover herself in a situation like this because she was independent and didn't think about it. And I mean, they definitely went after her, which rightfully so in a situation like that. Like that's where, our industry can be really neglectful and can give a bad name to good stylists because people hear stories like that and just expect, that's how it is. But so that was a crazy one. That was an interesting thing going through that. But that process made me really fine tune what we had because and not that something like that would happen in our salon anyways, but you have to make sure your team is trained properly on every procedure, every product you use, everything. And then B, making sure that you have those processes in place that are checking every box with every single client every time.
Yeah. I think that's one of those things, though. You know what I mean? Like, even then, still, accidents happen. It's like a car accident. Accidents happen all the time, and there are going to be times where things just happen. And so sometimes we can only do the best that we can do, but we have to try everything to make sure that we are protected, our team is protected, and our business is protected at all times. It's one of those things. I mean, we're dealing with chemicals, we're dealing with all kinds of different things. We're dealing with medication that people are taking, we're dealing with different body. Like, it is crazy what we deal with. I get so sick and tired of people saying, "Oh, you're a hairstylist." Do you even understand what goes into being a hairstylist? Like, it's a lot, and people need to realize that. One of the things that I think makes this the hardest for salon and spa owners when they're going through something like this is you are going to replay everything in your head. You're going to question everything that you did, everything that your employee did. You're going to get defensive. You're probably going to feel a lot of pressure just to try to fix it and make it stop. You want to respond, you want to fix it. You just want it to be over in every sense of the word. And you end up doing things you probably never would do if you weren't so stressed out. So you've really got to find who can be that calm, grounding person for you when you're going through something like this and really, really rely on them. Because when you're in that place, you're not really thinking about what's going on in the actual moment. You're just trying to get it done. And at this point, that's just not how it's going to work anymore. And you have to understand that. You don't get to handle it the way that you normally would in your business. It is going to move the way that it moves, step by step, and you have no say so in it whatsoever. So don't be hard on yourself. Give yourself grace. Make sure that you have someone who you can confide in and trust in and vent to and help walk you through it to keep you from walking off the ledge. Like, I would call Chandra immediately and be like, "I'm fixing to walk off the ledge, so talk me down. Like, calm me for just a second." Chandra, let's just say you were going through a situation like this and you're like all of us. Like, even though we say we're not going to freak out and we're not going to fall off the edge or do whatever, sometimes that's the natural reaction that takes over. What would you do in that situation to just make sure that you're handling everything and staying calm in the moment?
I mean, I think you just have to stop and you have to look at the situation from farther away. Like even the situation I was talking about with the model that we had that tried to come after us for her hair and all this stuff that signed the release form. I was even kind of getting emotional and crazy and I was writing out all these things I'm going to send to her and I'm going to respond to her comments when she puts them on social media and all this stuff. And I took a step back and the attorney, I just called in an attorney. We have an attorney we use. I just called him and I was like, "What do I do?" He's like, "Stop talking to her." He's like, "If she doesn't stop, then we'll send her this letter, whatever." And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Just calm down, just ignore her." I'm like, "Okay." So I think it's really just like take a minute and look at the actual situation. Don't make it worse than it is. Cause I think that's what we do. We get involved like that and we get crazy. And now we have a problem where if we just had just stopped and did the right thing to begin with, it might have not ever escalated to any higher levels.
Yeah, I would say 9 times out of 10, if we would just stop, it wouldn't ever escalate. It would be able to be finished, settled, and probably found in your favor most of the time if you would just stop in the beginning. Okay, guys, so if you ever find yourself in this situation or you just want to actually be prepared for it, you need to have a really simple way that you are going to handle it instead of trying to figure it out in the moment. I think that is one of the biggest mistakes that Chandra and I see when we are coaching salon and spa owners is they're never prepared, there's never structure, there's never systems. It's always just figuring it out in the moment, and that is going to burn you if you are not careful. Not only that, but who wants to run a business that way anyway? When you run a business that way, you are literally stuck in it 24/7, and that's not entrepreneurship. It's just not. That's not the way that it should work. So the first part that you need to look at is your communication, because this is where most of people mess up, okay? Once an insurance claim is filed or a client takes legal action, stop reaching out to the client completely. Contact your attorney or the insurance adjuster immediately. I mean, immediately. If they message you, don't go through any long explanation either. You should not try to defend anything. I think that's the easiest way to say it. Don't try to defend anything. Just talk to your insurance adjuster, talk to your attorney, whatever. It's not as hard as it sounds. I promise you. The second part is where everything goes. So you need one place that you are going to put everything. That's your, you know, everything that's going to your insurance company or your attorney. So if you get an email, if you get messages, if you get paperwork, if you get anything, you're not sitting there trying to decide what to do with it. You are going to have a place that it goes and you are going to be able to forward it exactly where it needs to go within a second, like super, super quick. No side conversations on, let me try to figure this out and then send it over. I'm going to handle this part myself. Nope. Get it all over. Make sure it's in one spot. The third part is getting all of that documentation together. Now, we talked about this last week. If you don't have this system in place already, you're going to be in trouble because you can't really get the documentation together after the fact. Sure, you may be able to get consent forms, you may be able to have before and after photos or something like that, but you need everything. You need everything. Most of us are pretty smart. We know when a client is going to cause a problem, don't we, Chandra?
Yeah, and even with the girl that I was talking about, there were red flags in the very beginning, and I should have went with my gut, and I didn't.
Yeah, for sure. It happens. So I am a note taker. Like, this is why I think things, once again, like we said last week, the client diary system is so important in your salon because you've got notes, you've got photos, you've got video, you've got literally everything that you need. And it is all in one file. I'm telling you, if you have to send stuff to your insurance adjuster or your legal team, send everything. Do not feel like you have to pick and choose. Give it all. Absolutely everything is going to be important. Then your forms. So you have to have those. We've talked about them. I am so tired of people in this industry thinking that one form signed is enough for clients. It is not. You need consultation forms. You need consent forms. You need waivers for anything where there is risk, anything at all. And you don't need to just have them, you have to actually use them every single time and even go a step beyond that. We make all of our clients re-sign agreements every single year so they are up to date. Chandra, do you do anything like that?
Yeah, we have all that stuff. I mean, and that's those, and we have all the rules that have to be followed, right? Like if you have a client that's insisting on doing something that is against your judgment, our stylists either have the option to not do the service or they can make them sign a waiver before they do it, saying all of the things that could go wrong. Because some clients are insistent. They're like, I've been blonde forever. I know. I don't care if my hair's fried. Like, they're fine with it, you know? And so it's really making sure you're covering yourself, though, because they might say that. And then again, like we said earlier, it'll catch you on the back end if you didn't do, your due diligence in the beginning. So we have all those things.
And I think the last part is probably your team. They need to be trained on everything. They need to understand everything. They need to know the process for everything. And they also need to be taught in the training what happens when a client isn't happy or when there is a red flag or when something makes them feel uncomfortable. Because a lot of salon owners, I'm thinking back to all of the owners that I've coached over the last 7, 8 years. Do not think that I've ever seen a salon that trains their employees on what to do if they feel uncomfortable. As a stylist, as an esthetician, where do they go? What do they do? What process do they take in order to get the manager or the salon owner's attention so you can figure out what to do? So your team needs to be trained in everything, absolutely everything. Every situation that you can think of that may never happen in 100 years of ownership, they need to be trained on it. I think that is very, very important. I think we focus so much, Chandra, on skills training. We forget the important part of training. Don't get me wrong, skills training is important. It really, really is. But I think there are so many other things that we need to focus on that we just fall by the wayside all the time. And it could hurt us really bad in business. How do you feel about that?
Oh, yeah, I agree for sure. I think people will forgive you more for a bad service than a bad experience. And so, if those things aren't all put in place, then you could have both happen, right? Service and bad experience. But I think they're more forgiving if they have to make an adjustment to a service outcome than they are if other things were.
And I think the last part is just make sure that you, the owner, are always consistent with everything that you're doing. Your systems need to stay consistent. If you make changes, you've got to let everybody know about it. You've got to retrain people on that. I think you can't go back and forth anymore. Once it gets to a certain spot and you have to let somebody else handle it, let the pride go, let the fear go, let all of that go. Find you a good attorney, let them handle it because once it's at a certain level, it can't be in your hands anymore. And you've got to be able to trust somebody to do that. Chandra, when you think about like this entire situation, do you feel like most owners actually have a plan for something like this? Or is it usually just panic and try to figure it out?
I think it's panic and try to figure it out because that's how salon owners handle everything. So I think for some reason that's what we just do in all situations. So yeah, I feel like that's where it usually goes for sure.
I agree with you, and I think that's a really important point, even though I may be getting off topic a little bit. We are kind of drama mamas in the beauty industry. Like, we freak out about everything, or we handle things in such a crazy way sometimes, and we've got to really learn if we want to grow sustainable, scalable, sellable businesses at some point, we've got to woo-saw just a little bit and get down to being like normal entrepreneurs and CEOs. I know we care. I know there's passion there, but other CEOs in other industries have that, and they don't all freak out the way that salon and spa owners do. So I think that's a really good point to make. I think one of the biggest takeaways here is when something gets to this level, you cannot handle it off of instinct. You have to have a process, you have to have clarity, and you need to know when something has moved out of your hands and into a different kind of situation. That's just really what matters. All right, guys, let's switch gears for a second and get into this week's listener question. We really do love getting these and hearing what you guys are dealing with in your business. So today's question comes from Tiara in Oregon, and she asked, I am a solo stylist, but I feel stuck at the same income level. It's like I've hit a plateau that I cannot get out of. How do you know if you just need to get better at what you're already doing or that it's time to grow and think bigger? Chandra, what would you say to that?
I mean, I think it's probably time to look at what you're doing and it's time to probably grow, maybe see why you're stuck. I feel like, if you're just stuck doing the same things over and over again and you're not making any more money and you're there, it might be time for a price increase or it might be time to evaluate what services you're offering. Maybe you need to change that up. I feel like there's so many things to that, like to say, because you could really look at every aspect of your business and start changing those things because I think it's easy for us to get stuck in that rut and you can't make any more money. You hit, like we always say all the time, that glass ceiling when you're independent and you have to start looking at other ways to kind of amp things up to bring in more revenue. So I would say service timing, service pricing, service offerings, like all of those things and see, is it time for an increase? Can you cut a corner somewhere? Maybe it's time to hire an assistant. Like there's a lot of those little things that I would look at.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would also say reverse engineer everything. Take a step back and what do you want your business to look like 5 years from now? Do you still want to be the one that's having to produce every bit of the revenue with your own two hands? Or is that something that you may want to get out of in the near future? Because if that's the case, then you need to go through all the steps that Chandra said, but you also need to look at bringing other people in. And that's going to require a lot of work before it ever happens. If you're solo and that's what you want your life to look like, you are in a great spot to get systems set up beforehand so that you can actually build a sustainable beauty business with employees that can help generate that revenue for you and give them the opportunity to have an amazing career at the same time. All right, guys, if you take anything away from today's episode, I hope that it's this: a salon, a spa, a beauty business. As owners of that, we are going to go through our days all the time thinking that something like a claim or a lawsuit just won't happen to us. It's just not going to happen. The majority of us out there are doing good work. We have talented teams and we care deeply about our clients. So in our heads, something like this feels really far off. It feels like it only happens in those extreme situations or to people who do things wrong. But that is not the reality of our industry. There are a lot of normal everyday situations that can turn into something bigger depending on how a client reacts. And most owners, they do not think about this until they're already in it. In fact, around 40% of salons in the United States alone deal with some type of insurance claim or legal situation with a client on a yearly basis. That is a huge percentage. I was actually kind of shocked when I read that. So this isn't some rare, far off thing that only happens once in a while. And that's really the takeaway from this, I think. It's not to scare you, it's not to make you overthink everything, but just to be real about it, about what can happen. This is part of running a business in this industry. And the more you understand what it actually looks like and how it works, the less likely you are to make it worse if it does ever happen to you. If you're out there and you're listening to this and you realize you've never really thought through something like this before, that's okay. Most owners have not. But now you at least know what this looks like and how it works. And that makes a huge difference if you ever find yourself in a situation like this. If you need help building real structure in your salon, spa, or beauty business where you're not guessing anymore, you're not reacting, you're not trying to figure things out as you go, that's exactly what we do at the Beauty Biz Agency. Make sure that you visit our website, www.thebeautybizagency.com. You can grab some of our free resources there, check out our coaching options, and we also have some amazing master classes. And if you had even one moment while listening where you thought, okay, yeah, I've never really thought about it like that, send this episode to another salon owner out there who needs to hear it. It helps people find us. If you've been listening and getting value and you haven't left us a review yet, please take a quick second to do that. It really means the world to us. Chandra, how can everybody stay connected with everything we have going on at the Beauty Biz Agency?
Yeah, make sure you're following us on social media at the Beauty Biz Agency on Facebook and Instagram, or the Beauty Biz Mentors on TikTok. And stay in touch. Shoot us a message if you have any questions you'd like us to answer on the air. Definitely send us a DM with those, and we will answer those for you.
Absolutely. That's a wrap, guys. You've been listening to the Beauty Biz Breakdown, where salon owners stop guessing and start handling their business like CEOs they know they want to become. Until next time, be aware of what can happen, be prepared for it, and don't wait until you're in it to figure it out. Now go out there, make bank, run the show, and ditch that chair. And as always, keep slaying those business goals with a whole lot of swagger. If this episode lit a fire under you, don't just walk away and let it die out. Deep down, you already know where you want your business and your life to go. And the truth is, the only thing standing between where you are and where you want to be is a real plan to get you there. That's exactly what we help you build. So if you're ready to stop trying to figure it out on your own, head to thebeautybizagency.com and book your free strategy call. That call can give you the clarity that you've been needing and a real plan to move your business forward. Because at the end of the day, the only thing standing between you and the salon business you've been dreaming about is whether or not you're willing to take the action and the steps in order to build it.